The Vescari had not lost a war in 9,000 years. They knew this the way a fish knows water. It was simply true. It was the shape of the universe. Warlord Thesic stood on the command deck of his flagship and looked at the stars. His ship was called the Eternal Spear Asterisk. It was 3 miles long. Its hull was grown from black coral metal, hardened in the heart of a dying sun. 40,000 warriors served on it. Around it floated the rest of the fleet, 200 warships, all of them pointed at the same small blue world. The world was called Earth. Thesic had read the file. He had read it twice. He did not believe most of it. The humans had been flying between their own planets for less than 100 of their years. They had no jump drives worth the name. Their weapons threw small chunks of metal and crude light. Their largest warship was smaller than one of Thesic's escort cruisers. By every measure the Vascari used to judge a species, the humans were children. Loud, fast-breeding, soft-shelled children who had wandered too far from their crib. And yet, "Tell me again," Thesic said. His second-in-command, a lean officer named Drovo, lowered his head. 3 scout fleets, Warlord. The Threlek sent the first, 12 ships. None returned. The Makai sent the second, 18 ships, expecting an easy harvest of a young world. None returned. The Council itself sent the third, 40 ships, their best. And 2 returned, Warlord. Both crews mad. One commander cut out his own eyes before he could be questioned. The other only repeated one phrase again and again until he died. Thesic turned. What phrase? Drovo hesitated. They do not stop. The deck was quiet. Outside, the stars did not blink. Thesic let out a low sound that in his species meant amusement. He had ruled fleets for 600 years. He had burned cities on a dozen worlds. He had once held an entire civilization hostage for a century, taking what he wanted when he wanted it. Fear was a tool he used on others. He did not feel it himself. He had forgotten how. Children break their toys when they panic, he said. 3 poorly led fleets stumbled into an unknown world and lost their nerve. That is all this is. I will not lose mine. He looked at Earth again, so small, so blue, a wet little marble spinning in the dark. Begin the approach, he said. We will be in orbit within 1 cycle. I want this finished before the second. The Eternal Spear turned its nose toward the human world, and the fleet turned with it, 200 blades of coral metal sliding through the black. The Vascari had a way of fighting. It had been perfected over 9,000 years, refined in war after war, written into their bones and their training and their machines. They called it the pattern. The pattern was simple, and it was beautiful, and it had never failed. First, you arrived in overwhelming force. You did not sneak. You did not probe. You came with everything all at once, so that the enemy understood in the first moment that resistance was a waste of breath. The Vascari believed wars were won before the first shot. They were won in the mind. The fleet that frightened its enemy into stillness had already won. Second, you struck the centers, not the soldiers. The centers asterisk. The cities, the leaders, the places where a people kept their meaning. You broke the will, not the body. A species that lost its capital and its kings would surrender within days. Every species did. Every species had. Third, you offered terms. Harsh terms, but terms. You let the broken thing live because a living slave world produced more than a dead one. This was not mercy. The Vascari had no word for mercy. It was simply the most efficient end to a war. Arrive, break, offer. 9,000 years. It had never failed. Thesic had run the pattern 81 times. He knew its rhythm the way a musician knows a song. He expected the humans to follow the same notes every other species had followed. Shock, panic, a few brave fools throwing themselves uselessly against his hull, then the dawning understanding, then the begging. He did not expect the humans to be waiting. The fleet dropped out of jump space at the edge of the human system, beyond the orbit of the outermost worlds. This was correct. This was the pattern. You arrived far enough out to be seen, close enough to threaten, and you advanced slowly, letting the enemy watch death come. The sensor officer made a sound, a small one, but on a Vascari command deck where silence was law, even a small sound carried. "Report," Thesic said. "Warlord, there are contacts ahead of us, already in formation." "Show me." The great display lit up, and Thesic, for the first time in a very long time, went still. The humans were there, not scattered, not fleeing, not begging. They sat in a wide arc between the Vascari fleet and their homeworld, hundreds of small ships arranged with a discipline that Thesic had not expected from children. They had known. Somehow they had known the Vascari were coming, and to the hour, and they had come out to meet them in the dark, far from their cities, far from everything the pattern was designed to threaten. You could not break the centers if the enemy met you in the empty between worlds. "They have moved their war away from their homes," Drovo said quietly. "They are protecting the centers by refusing to let us near them." "I can see that," Thesic said. He studied the human ships. They were ugly. There was no other word. The Vascari built ships like blades, like growing things, smooth and dark and elegant. The humans built ships like nothing at all. Boxes, slabs, great ungainly things bristling with crude turrets and exposed machinery, painted in dull grays, scarred and dented and patched. They looked less like warships than like factories that had decided to fly. There was no beauty in them, no art, no fear of being seen as ugly. They looked, Thesic thought, like they had been built to do one thing and nothing else. And then he saw it. At the center of the human line, larger than all the rest, sat a single ship. It was not 3 miles long like the asterisk Eternal Spear asterisk. It was perhaps a third that size. But it sat in the formation the way a mountain sits in a valley, and every other human ship was angled around it, drawing from it, defending it, deferring to it. It was the ugliest thing Thesic had ever seen. A long gray slab of a hull, blunt at both ends, covered in armor plate that had been welded on in layers, scarred black in 100 places where something had hit it and failed to get through. It carried more guns than seemed possible, jammed into every surface, pointing in every direction. It had no grace. It had no fear. It simply existed, heavy and patient, like a fist that had not yet been thrown. His sensor officer spoke again, reading the human transmissions, translating the name the humans had painted on its hull in letters 100 feet high. "It is called the asterisk Indomitable Asterisk, Warlord." Thesic did not know the word. He asked for the meaning. The officer was quiet a moment as the translation matrix worked. "It means," the officer said slowly, "the thing that cannot be put down." In the centuries that followed, the Vascari would argue about exactly when the war was lost. Some said it was lost in that first moment, when they found the humans waiting in the dark instead of cowering at home. Some said it was lost earlier, in a council chamber, when an old warlord laughed at a file he should have feared. Some said it was lost the day humanity first looked up at the stars and decided the dark was not a thing to be afraid of, but a thing to be ready for. But none of them, not one, ever said the war was won. Because the Vascari did not win it. Thesic did what the pattern demanded. He did not flinch. He could not be seen to flinch, not in front of 40,000 warriors who had never seen their warlord afraid. "They have made a mistake," he announced, his voice carrying across the deck. "They think a wall of ships can stop us. They do not understand that they are simply showing us where to aim. We will break their fleet here in the open, and then their cities will have nothing left to hide behind. The pattern holds. Advance." The fleet advanced. Thesic watched the human line as the distance closed. He watched for the things he always saw at this point. The ragged movements of a panicking enemy, ships breaking formation, captains losing nerve. The first desperate, badly aimed shots fired far too early by some terrified gunner who could not wait. He saw none of it. The human line did not move. It did not flinch. It sat in the dark and waited, and the waiting was worse than any attack because it meant the humans were not afraid. It meant they were asterisk choosing the moment asterisk. They were letting the Vascari come closer and closer, into a range the humans had decided on, for reasons the Vascari did not yet understand. The Indomitable sat at the center of it all, silent, patient, its 100 guns dark. Drovo leaned close. Warlord, they are not transmitting demands. They are not transmitting threats. They are not transmitting anything. Nothing. One signal, Warlord, on an open channel, repeating to us and to their own fleet, the same words over and over. Thesic felt something he had not felt in 600 years. A small cold thing, deep in his chest, that he did not have a name for because he had forgotten it. What words, he said. The translation matrix turned the human sounds into Vascari, and the officer read them aloud, and the words went out across the silent command deck of the asterisk Eternal Spear asterisk into 40,000 listening ears. Not one step closer to our home, not while one of us still flies, not while the Indomitable still floats. Come and find out what that costs you. Thesic looked at the ugly gray slab of a ship sitting at the heart of the human line, the thing they called the one that cannot be put down, and for the first time in 9,000 years of unbroken Vascari victory, he understood that the file had not been wrong. The humans really did not stop. He had simply refused to believe it. Warlord Drovo said, "Your orders." Thesic opened his mouth, and the Indomitable fired first. The first shot from the asterisk Indomitable was not aimed at a ship. It was aimed at the dark between two ships. A long bolt of white fire crossed the empty space and struck nothing, burning out against the void. Thesic almost laughed. A miss. The children could not even shoot straight. Then the second shot came, and the third, and the asterisk Eternal Spear's asterisk sensor officer made the small sound again, the one that carried. Warlord, they are not missing. They struck nothing. They struck the points between our ships, Warlord, the exact center of every gap in our formation. They are measuring us, marking the spaces, telling us they know where we are not. The officer's voice was thin. They are telling us they know where we will move before we move. Thesic understood then, a thing about the way humans fought. The Vascari fought to frighten. The first shot of a Vascari battle was always aimed at something precious, to break the heart. The humans had fired at nothing. They had wasted 3 shots on empty space, and in doing so they had said, "We are not trying to frighten you. We are simply taking your measure. The frightening comes later." It was not the pattern. It was the opposite of the pattern, and Thesic did not know any other way. "All ships," he said, "fire." 200 Vascari warships opened up at once. It was a thing of terrible beauty. The Vascari fought as a single organism, every gun firing in a rhythm that had been drilled into them across 9,000 years, light and fire crossing the dark in waves, each wave timed to land as the last one faded, so that the enemy was never given a breath, never given a moment of darkness in which to think. Whole worlds had surrendered at the sight of that opening barrage. The sky itself seemed to catch fire. The human line vanished behind a wall of light. Thesic waited for the wreckage. He waited for the broken hulls and the spreading clouds of frozen air and the small bright flashes of dying ships. This was the moment the enemy understood. This was the moment they began to break. The light faded. The human line was still there. Not untouched. Several of the smaller ships were gone, simply gone, scattered into glowing dust. Others were burning, venting, drifting. The humans had been hurt, badly. A fifth of their fleet was gone in a single barrage. But the line had not broken. The ships that remained had pulled in tighter, closing the gaps where their dead had been, and at the center of it the Indomitable sat completely unmarked, its layered armor not even scorched, and it was still firing, slow and steady, one heavy shot at a time, and every shot was landing. Thesic watched one of his cruisers come apart. The Indomitable had fired a single bolt. The bolt had gone through the cruiser's forward armor, through 3 decks, through the reactor, and out the far side, and the cruiser had folded around the wound like paper and died. "One shot, one ship," Warlord Drovo said. "Their flagship, its weapons, they are not like ours." "Explain." "We fire many small shots fast to overwhelm. They fire few shots slow, but each one is." Drovo struggled for the word. "Each one is complete asterisk, Warlord. They are not trying to overwhelm us. Every shot they fire is meant to kill one ship, and it kills one ship. They are not wasting anything. They are simply removing us, one at a time." Thesic looked at the slow, patient rhythm of the asterisk Indomitable's asterisk guns, and understood another thing about humans. The Vascari fought to make the enemy feel that resistance was hopeless. The humans fought to make resistance asterisk expensive asterisk. They were not trying to frighten Thesic out of the system. They were not trying to break his will. They had no interest in his will at all. They were simply going to charge him a price, in ships and warriors, for every mile he came closer to their world, and they were going to keep charging that price until either he stopped paying or they ran out of things to sell. There was no pattern for an enemy who did not care whether you were afraid. "Close the range," Thesic said. "Their flagship is slow. We are faster. Get inside its rhythm. Swarm it. Overwhelm it with numbers. 200 against 1. The fleet surged forward. The thing the Vascari did not understand about the Indomitable was that it had been built by people who expected to lose. Vascari ships were built by a people who had not lost in 9,000 years. They were built to win. They were elegant and deadly, and they assumed in every line of their design that the enemy would break first. They were not built to be hit. They were built to do the hitting. The Indomitable had been built by a people who knew in their bones that they were young and small and outgunned, and that anything that came for them would come bigger and meaner and more numerous than they could match. So the humans had not built a ship to win a fair fight. They had built a ship to survive an unfair one, to be hit over and over and keep firing, to lose every advantage and still be floating when the smoke cleared. Layer upon layer of armor, each layer built to fail so the next could hold. Redundant reactors, so that killing one only made the ship angry. Guns that could be operated by hand if the power failed, by one crewman if the rest were dead. Damage control teams drilled until they could seal a breach in the dark, in vacuum, with the ship spinning. Every system on the asterisk Indomitable had a backup, and the backup had a backup, and the final backup was always the same: a human being who refused to die quietly. The Vascari swarmed it the way they had swarmed 100 enemy flagships. They came in close, where their numbers told, where one great ship could be pulled down by many small ones, like a beast brought down by a pack. And the Indomitable let them come. Thesic watched it happen and could not look away. His ships closed on the human flagship from every angle, pouring fire into it, and the fire landed. He could see it landing, great flowers of light blooming all across that ugly gray hull. By every rule of war the Vascari knew, the Indomitable should have died 10 times over. It did not die. The armor took the hits and held, and where it failed, the ship simply bled, venting air, venting fire, losing whole sections, and kept fighting. Its guns never stopped. As his ships came closer, the asterisk Indomitable's asterisk weapons found them at point-blank range. And at point-blank range, a human gun did not just kill a ship, it erased it. And the humans had done something else. As the Vascari swarmed in, the rest of the human fleet, the ugly little boxes and slabs, had closed in around their flagship not to run, but to add their guns to its guns. They had turned the swarm into a trap. The Vascari ships that pressed in close to kill the asterisk Indomitable found themselves surrounded on all sides by humans, caught in a storm of crossfire, and they began to die in numbers. Thesic watched 20 of his ships vanish in the space of a single breath. "Pull back," Drovo said, not to Thesic, to himself, his voice rising. Pull back, it is a trap. The flagship is the bait. Hold the line, Thesic snapped. We do not pull back, we have never pulled back, we are Vascari. But he could hear it now, under his own voice. The cold thing in his chest had a name after all. He had simply not spoken it in 600 years. It was fear. The human transmission came again. On the open channel, the same calm voice, the same calm words, going out to both fleets at once so that every Vascari warrior could hear it. You are in our range now. You came to our home and you crossed into our range. Everything past this line is ours. Welcome to it. And then the Indomitable did the thing that the Vascari would tell stories about for 1,000 years. It stopped firing single shots. For the entire battle so far, the human flagship had fired slowly, one heavy bolt at a time, patient and precise. Thesic had assumed this was its limit. He had assumed the slow rhythm was all the ugly thing could manage. It was not its limit. It had been holding back. It had been waiting for the Vascari to come close, to commit, to crowd in around it where they could not run. Now every gun on the Asterisk Indomitable fired at once. Sky turned white. Not the careful, single shots of before, but everything, the full weight of the ship that could not be put down, unleashed at point-blank range into the heart of the Vascari swarm. Thesic's display did not show him ships dying one at a time anymore. It showed him whole sections of his fleet simply gone asterisk, swept away in a single moment of human fury that had been saved up and held back and spent all at once, on purpose, at the exact moment it would hurt the most. 40 of his ships died in that one barrage. 40. The Eternal Spear shook as debris hammered its hull. Warning lights bloomed across the command deck. And through it all, the Indomitable sat in the center of the storm it had made, scarred and burning and venting, and absolutely, completely, refusing to die. Drovo had gone silent. The whole command deck had gone silent. Thesic stared at the display, at the wreckage of 40 warships, at the ugly gray ship still floating at the center of the human line, still firing, slower now, back to its patient single shots, as if it had simply cleared its throat and would now continue the conversation. He understood, finally, the thing the mad survivor had tried to tell the council, the thing he had laughed at. It was not that the humans were stronger. They were not. Ship for ship, the Vascari were stronger. It was not that the humans were faster or had better weapons or commanded better. It was something simpler and far more terrible. The humans did not stop. You could hurt them. You could kill them. You could take a fifth of their fleet in a single barrage, and they would close the gaps and keep coming, and they would charge you for every ship you killed, and they would never ever break. There was no pattern for that. There was no 9,000 years of perfect war that prepared a Vascari warlord for an enemy who simply would not agree to lose. Warlord Drovo whispered, "What do we do?" Thesic looked at the Asterisk Indomitable. And the Indomitable Asterisk, slow and patient and unstoppable, turned its blunt gray nose directly toward the Asterisk Eternal Spear Asterisk, and began, for the first time, to advance. Inside the Asterisk Indomitable Asterisk, a woman named Captain Esh Marrow stood on a command deck that did not look anything like Thesic's. Thesic's deck was clean, quiet, built for one mind to command many. Esh's deck was loud and crowded and human. 40 people worked in close quarters, shouting numbers, sealing leaks, passing tools, eating when they could, sleeping in shifts at their stations. The air smelled of metal and sweat and burnt wiring. Somewhere below, a damaged team was singing while they worked, a low, ugly marching song, because singing kept the fear out and the hands steady. Esh had not slept in 2 days. Her ship had taken 400 direct hits and was still flying. She did not think of this as remarkable. She thought of it as the bare minimum the Indomitable was built for. "Forward batteries holding," her gunnery chief called. "We lost number 6 turret, fires contained, crews out, everything else green." "Push us forward," Esh said. "Right at their big one, the 3-mile monster. That's the head. We cut off the head, the rest of them lose their nerve. Ma'am, that's straight into the heart of their fleet. I know what it is, Ash said. Push us forward. She did not say the other thing she was thinking, which was that the Asterisk Indomitable did not have the fuel or the air or the armor left to fight a long battle, and that her best chance, maybe her only chance, was to ram the entire war straight down the throat of the enemy commander before her ship finally died. The humans had not come out here to win cleanly. They had come out here to make absolutely certain that no Vascari ship ever reached Earth, and if that meant the Asterisk Indomitable burned, then it would burn pointed at the biggest enemy in the sky. Send the fleet our heading, Ash said. Tell them form behind us. We're opening a road. Thesic watched the human formation change and did not understand it at first. The humans were not spreading out to surround him. They were not pulling back to defend their world. They were doing something that made no sense by the pattern, no sense by any war the Vascari had ever fought. They were forming a spear. The Indomitable was the point of it. The rest of the human fleet, what was left of it, fell in behind the great gray ship in a long, narrow column, every ship adding its guns to the front, and the whole formation drove forward in a single line aimed directly at the Asterisk Eternal Spear Asterisk. They were going to try to cut through 200 warships to reach one. They were going to try to drive a single spear through the middle of the entire Vascari fleet to kill its head. It was madness. It was suicide. The human ships would be fired on from every side as they passed. They would be torn apart. And Thesic understood with a sick certainty that it did not matter, because the humans had already decided they did not need to survive. They only needed to reach him. If the Asterisk Indomitable died with its guns buried in the Asterisk Eternal Spear Asterisk, the humans would count that a victory. They were not fighting to live. They were fighting to make sure he did not. They mean to ram us, Drovo said. They mean worse than that, Thesic said quietly. They mean to Asterisk trade Asterisk, their flagship for ours, their captain for me, and they think it is a good trade. He looked around his command deck at the warriors who had served him for centuries, who had never seen him lose, who were watching him now to see what a Vascari warlord did when the pattern failed. He did not know. There was nothing in 9,000 years that told him. The human spear hit the Vascari fleet, and the Vascari fleet did what it had always done. It closed in. It swarmed. From every direction, Thesic's ships poured fire into the long human column, and the human ships began to die. But here was the thing the Vascari learned in those terrible minutes about the way humans had built their war. The human ships died facing forward. Not one of them turned to run. Not one of them broke from the column to save itself. As each human ship was hit and began to fail, its captain pushed it forward, into the Vascari fire, spending the last of its engines and the last of its guns to clear a little more of the road for the ships behind it. They died like a wall falling forward. And every human ship that died had taken Vascari ships with it, because the humans had built their ships to keep killing even as they died, weapons firing on dead man triggers, reactors set to burst at the moment of death and take the nearest enemy with them. The Vascari were not fighting ships. They were fighting a thing that got more dangerous as it died. And at the front of it all, soaking up fire that would have shattered 10 Vascari cruisers, came the Indomitable Asterisk. It did not die. It would not die. It bled and it burned and it lost whole sections of itself, and it kept coming, slow and patient and unstoppable, its guns clearing a path through the fleet, driving straight for the Asterisk Eternal Spear Asterisk. Warlord, Drovo said. His voice had changed. It was very quiet now, very calm, the calm of a warrior who has accepted the shape of things. We can still win this. We have the numbers. We are killing them faster than they are killing us. If we hold, we will destroy their fleet. Yes, Thesic said. But the cost, Drovo turned to him. Warlord, even if we win, we will lose half our ships, more to take one world. One asterisk young asterisk world of no special value defended by children who fly factories. He paused. And there are other human ships. The file said, other fleets, other worlds they hold. If we pay half our fleet for this one world, then we cannot afford the next, Thesic finished. This was the thing. This was the trap the humans had built, and they had built it long before the asterisk eternal spear ever arrived. They had not built a fleet that could win. They had built a fleet that made winning cost more than it was worth. Every world humanity held would cost the same. Every battle would be this battle. The humans did not need to beat the Vascari. They only needed to make the Vascari understand that beating them was a wound from which the Vascari would never recover. 9,000 years of victory had been built on a simple truth. War was a way to gain. You fought because winning made you stronger. The Vascari had never once fought a war that left them weaker than before. The humans had made themselves into a war that could only ever leave you weaker. Win or lose, you bled, and they had made very sure you knew it. They are not trying to defeat us, Thesic said, watching the asterisk indomitable tear through the heart of his fleet. They are trying to teach us that we cannot afford them. That is the whole war. That is the only war they ever meant to fight. The Indomitable broke through the last ring of Vascari ships. It came out the far side burning along half its length, trailing fire and debris, 3 of its reactors dead, half its guns silent. By every measure it was a dying ship. It should have drifted. It should have stopped. It accelerated. It came straight at the asterisk eternal spear asterisk, this ugly gray ruin of a thing, this dying mountain, and it opened up with every gun it had left, pouring fire into the 3-mile flagship at last. And the asterisk eternal spear shook and bled, and its warning lights screamed, because even the greatest ship the Vascari had ever built had never been hit by something that simply refused to understand it should already be dead. It is going to ram us, Drovo said. Yes, Thesic said. We can destroy it, all batteries on the flagship. We can kill it before it reaches us. And the rest of their fleet will use that moment to break through to our flank, Thesic said, because he could see it, the human ships repositioning even now, every move a trade, every move designed so that whatever he did cost him something. If I turn everything on their flagship, I lose my flank. If I save my flank, their flagship reaches us. They have given me no good choice. They have given me only different ways to bleed. He had run the pattern 81 times. Arrive, break, offer. He had never once been the one offered a choice between losses. The human voice came again on the open channel. Captain Eshmarrow, though Thesic did not know her name, her voice rough with exhaustion and smoke, speaking to him directly now. Asterisk big ship, I know you can hear me. My boat's dying. I've got maybe 10 minutes of fight left in her and then she's scrap. But I'm aimed right at you, and I've got enough left to reach you, and when I get there I'm going to put every gun I have left into your bridge. A pause, the crackle of a damaged channel. Here's the thing, though, you don't have to let me. You can turn around, right now. You can take your fleet and go home and tell whoever sent you that Earth costs too much. That's the deal. That's the only deal. You leave and you live, and we go back to building more ships exactly like this one for the next time somebody decides we look easy. Another pause. Or you can come finish it, and maybe you win, and maybe you take Earth, but you'll take it with half a fleet and you'll know every Vascari left alive will know what one of our ships costs you, and we've got a lot more ships. Your move, big ship. The channel went quiet. The asterisk Indomitable kept coming, burning, dying, unstoppable, dead set on the asterisk eternal spear asterisk. And Warlord Thesic, who had not lost a war in 9,000 years, who had forgotten the name of fear until an hour ago, stood on his command deck and understood that, for the first time in the history of his people, the question was not how do we win asterisk. The question was asterisk how much does winning cost, and can we survive paying it? He had no answer in the pattern. So he had to find one himself. Thesic stood very still while his fleet burned around him. A Vaskari warlord was never supposed to need time to think. The pattern thought for him. 81 wars, and he had never once stood frozen on his own command deck while his officers waited for an order that did not come. They were waiting now. Drovo, the gunnery officers, the whole deck, 40,000 warriors across the asterisk eternal spear asterisk, and behind him on the great display, 200 ships becoming fewer by the second. The Indomitable was 4 minutes away. Thesic made himself look at the numbers. He had spent his whole life refusing to look at numbers, because the pattern made numbers unnecessary. You did not count the cost of victory when victory always paid for itself. But the humans had forced the numbers into his hands, and now he had to read them. He had arrived with 200 ships. He had 90 left. The humans had come with perhaps 300 small ships and one great one. They had maybe 60 ships left, and most of those were dying. By the count, he was winning. By the count, if he held the line and fought to the end, he would destroy the human fleet, kill the asterisk Indomitable asterisk, and take Earth. He would have perhaps 40 ships left when it was done. 40 ships. He had come to this system with the third largest fleet the Vaskari Council possessed. If he took Earth and walked away with 40 ships, he would walk away no longer a warlord but a beggar, his strength spent on a single young world that produced nothing the Vaskari needed and never had. And the humans held other worlds. The file said so. 6 other worlds, each one surely defended the same way, each one surely guarded by ships built like the asterisk Indomitable asterisk, by people who did not stop. If Earth cost him 160 ships, the next world would cost the same, and the one after that. The Vaskari did not have enough fleets in all their 9,000 years of conquest to pay that price 7 times over. The humans had not built a fortress around one world. They had built an asterisk price tag on their entire species, and they had made sure the first buyer would feel exactly what it cost. Drovo, Thesic said. Warlord, in 9,000 years, has a Vaskari fleet ever withdrawn from a battle it was winning? Drovo was quiet a long moment. No, Warlord, never. To withdraw from a battle we are losing is wisdom. To withdraw from a battle we are winning is. He could not find the word because the Vaskari language did not have one. It had never needed one. There is no word for it, Thesic said, because we have never needed to imagine it. That is the trap, Drovo, not their ships, not their guns. That we built a people who cannot imagine stopping when we are ahead, and they built a people who cannot imagine stopping at all. And when those two peoples meet, only one of them has thought about what comes after the battle. He looked at the human flagship, 3 minutes out now, burning, coming. They have. We have not. They have already decided how this ends. We are still pretending it is a battle. On the asterisk Indomitable asterisk, Captain Eshmaro watched the asterisk Eternal Spear grow huge in her forward display and waited to die. She was not afraid exactly. She had passed fear 2 days ago, somewhere around the 300th hit. What was left was something colder and clearer, a kind of total focus. The same thing her damaged teams felt when they sealed a breach in vacuum without thinking about the vacuum. There was only the next thing to do, and then the next, and the asterisk Eternal Spear was the last next thing, and she was going to do it. 2 minutes to contact, her helmsman said. He was 19. He had not been afraid either, not visibly, the entire battle. Esh did not know if that was courage or shock and had decided it did not matter. All remaining batteries, Esh said. On my mark, everything we have left into their bridge section. We don't pull the ship away, we drive in. If we're going through them, not past them. She put a hand on the cold metal of the command rail. The Indomitable shuddered under her, dying by degrees and still flying, still aimed, still hers. It's been an honor, every one of you. Now let's send them a bill they'll never stop paying. Captain, the comms officer said suddenly. Captain, the big ship, the enemy flagship, it's what? It's transmitting, open channel to us, and to its own fleet. Esh looked at the asterisk eternal spear asterisk, 90 seconds away. "Put it through," she said. Thessic's voice went out across two fleets in his own tongue and in the human tongue both, because he wanted no possibility of being misunderstood. He spoke slowly. He chose each word. He was, in that moment, doing a thing no Vaskari warlord had ever done, and he found that the words came hard, like stones pulled from frozen ground. "This is Warlord Thessic of the asterisk eternal spear asterisk. I speak to the human fleet, and I speak to my own." A pause. "I have fought 81 wars. I have not lost one. I came to this world believing it would be the 82nd. I was taught, as all my people are taught, that war is a thing you do to grow stronger, that a victory which leaves you weaker is not a victory at all, but a wound that wears the face of one." His voice did not shake. He would not let it shake. "By the count, I am winning this battle. By the count, if I hold, I will destroy your fleet and take your world. And I will leave this system with 40 ships, having spent the strength of generations on a single world I did not need, while 6 more of your worlds wait, each one ready to charge me the same price." The Indomitable was 60 seconds out. It did not slow. "You have not built a fleet to defeat me," Thessic said. "You have built a fleet to bankrupt me, and you have succeeded because you have made me do a thing my people have never done in 9,000 years. You have made me count." He closed his eyes. "I will not pay your price." On the asterisk Indomitable asterisk, no one breathed. "All ships of my fleet," Thessic said, and now his voice was no longer speaking to the humans but to his own warriors, 90 ships full of beings who had never once heard their warlord say what he said next. "Cease fire. Reverse course. We are withdrawing from this system." The command deck of the asterisk eternal spear erupted. Not in cheers, in something closer to horror. A Vaskari fleet did not withdraw from a battle it was winning. There was no drill for it, no song for it, no honor in it. Officers turned from their stations to stare at their warlord. Drovo stood frozen. "Warlord," Drovo said, "our warriors will not understand. The council will not understand. To withdraw while winning, they will say you have shamed 9,000 years." "Then let them say it," Thessic said. "Let them say Thessic was the first warlord in 9,000 years to look at a victory and see the wound inside it. Let them say Thessic was the coward who saved the fleet that 81 warlords before him would have spent on a wet little world that gave us nothing." He opened his eyes. "Or let them sit where I sit and look at what I am looking at and find a better answer. I have searched the whole of the pattern, Drovo. There is no answer in it. The pattern was built by people who never met an enemy who refused to lose. We have met one now, and the only victory left to us is the one where we are still strong enough to go home." The eternal spear began to turn. Slowly, hugely, the 3-mile flagship swung its nose away from Earth, away from the asterisk Indomitable, away from the battle it was winning, and the 90 surviving ships of the Vaskari fleet turned with it, ceasing fire, falling into a withdrawal formation that none of them had ever practiced because none of them had ever needed it. The Indomitable was 40 seconds from contact when the enemy flagship turned away. Eshmaro watched the 3-mile ship show her its flank, watched the whole Vaskari fleet stop firing and begin to pull back toward the edge of the system, and for one full second she did not believe it. She had built her whole mind around dying in the next 40 seconds. She had let go of everything that came after. To suddenly have an asterisk after asterisk again was almost more than she could hold. "Captain," her helmsman said, They're leaving. They're actually leaving." "Hold our course," Esh said. Her voice was steady. She did not know how. "Don't fire, don't change anything. If this is a trick, I want us still aimed at his head when it springs." It was not a trick. The Vaskari fleet withdrew. Ship by ship, it gathered at the edge of the system, and then, in a single coordinated flash of jumplight, 200 ships worth of 9,000 years of unbroken victory folded up and vanished into the dark, and the system was quiet, and Earth still turned, blue and small and whole, behind the burning wreck of the fleet that had refused to let anything reach it. The asterisk Indomitable drifted to a stop in the empty space where the asterisk Eternal Spear had been. For a long moment, no one on the command deck said anything. The damaged team stopped singing. The shouting stopped. There was only the tick and groan of a wounded ship and 40 exhausted human beings slowly understanding that they were going to live. Then someone laughed. Just one person, somewhere in the back, a short disbelieving bark of a laugh. And then another. And then the whole deck was making the strange, broken sound of people who had been certain they were going to die and now, impossibly, were not. Marrow did not laugh. She stood at the command rail of her dying ship and looked at the empty place where the largest warship she had ever seen had chosen, of its own will, to turn around. "He counted," she said quietly to no one. "Ma'am," the helmsman said. "Their commander, he did the math." She let out a long breath. "We didn't beat him. We were never going to beat him. We just made absolutely sure that beating us would cost him everything he had, and he was smart enough to add it up." She shook her head slowly. "Took an alien warlord with 9,000 years of winning behind him to do the one thing none of our enemies ever do. He looked at the price, and he walked away." The asterisk Indomitable floated in the dark above Earth, scarred and burning and broken and absolutely, completely unbeaten. It had not won. It had simply, as built, refused to be put down. And in the end, that had been enough. The Vascari Council did not take the news well. Thesic stood before them in the great stone chamber where warlords had reported their victories for 9,000 years, and he watched the old ones on their high seats lean toward each other and hiss. There were 12 of them, the oldest and most decorated beings of his species, and between them they had conquered more worlds than Thesic could name. Not one of them had ever ordered a withdrawal from a battle they were winning. The very idea was a thing they had no place to put. "You had 90 ships," said the eldest, a warlord named Kesson, who had been old when Thesic was young. 90 ships against a beaten enemy. You were winning, and you turned around." "Yes," Thesic said. "You shamed 9,000 years." "I saved a fleet," Thesic said. "I will let the council decide which of those two things matters more, but before it decides, I would ask the council a single question." The chamber went quiet. Warlords did not ask the council questions. They reported. They obeyed. But Thesic had already done the unthinkable once, and he found that the second time was easier. "How many fleets do we have?" Thesic said. "That are larger than the one I took to Earth." "Silence." "Two," Kesson said at last. "You commanded the third largest. There are two greater." "Two," Thesic repeated. "And the humans hold 7 worlds that we know of, each one defended as Earth was defended, each one guarded by ships built as the asterisk Indomitable was built. I spent half my fleet to fail to take one of those worlds. If I had pressed on, I would have spent it all." He looked around the chamber at the 12 oldest warriors of his people. "We have 3 fleets, honored ones. The humans have 7 worlds, and the will to defend every one of them to the last ship, and the patience to build more ships the moment the battle ends. I ask the council to do the thing I did at Earth. I ask the council to count." No one answered him. Because there was no answer. The numbers were the numbers, 3 fleets, 7 worlds, a people who did not stop. It took the Vascari Council a long time to understand what Thesic had brought them. He had not brought them a defeat. The Vascari knew how to survive defeats. They had a place for those, rare as they were. He had brought them something they had no place for at all. He had brought them the end of the pattern. For 9,000 years the Vascari had fought wars to grow. Every war made them stronger because they only fought wars they could win cheaply against enemies who broke. The pattern was not just a way of fighting. It was the whole foundation of who they were. Arrive, break, offer, grow. And the humans had built deliberately and patiently a thing the pattern could not eat, not a stronger enemy, a more expensive asterisk one, An enemy that could not be broken and would not be offered terms, that did not care whether you frightened it, that would charge you in blood for every step and then rebuild itself and wait for you to come back and try again. Against such an enemy, the pattern did not fail dramatically. It simply stopped making sense. Every victory was a wound. Growth ran backward. The humans had not beaten the Vaskari in battle. They had made the Vaskari way of war obsolete. And the most dangerous thing about it, the thing that kept the old warlords awake in the long dark of their stone halls, was that the humans had done it on purpose. They had looked at a galaxy full of older, stronger species, and instead of trying to become stronger than all of them, which they could not, they had made themselves into the one thing none of those species could afford to fight. They had not built a sword. They had built a price. It was, Kesson admitted at last, in the quiet of his own thoughts, the most intelligent strategy he had encountered in 9,000 years, and it had come from children who flew factories. They did not go back to Earth. The Council never said so openly. No order was ever written, no decree ever read in the Great Stone Chamber, because to write it down would be to admit out loud that the Vaskari had chosen not to take a world they could have taken, and the old ones could not yet bring themselves to say that. But the orders to ready the other two fleets quietly never came. The plans to return to the human worlds quietly went into drawers and stayed there. The Vaskari, who had not stopped expanding in 9,000 years, simply, quietly stopped. And other species noticed. The Threlak noticed. The Makai noticed. All the old conquering peoples of that part of the galaxy, who had watched the Vaskari take world after world for 9,000 years and had never dared stand against them, noticed that the Vaskari had gone to Earth with 200 ships and come back with 90, and had not gone back. They drew the obvious conclusion. They began, very carefully, to leave the humans alone. And then they began, even more carefully, to wonder whether the human way of building ships might be a thing worth learning. The galaxy did not change all at once. It changed the way a tide turns slowly and then altogether. But it changed. And it changed because one ugly gray ship had floated in the dark above one small blue world and refused to be put down, and one alien warlord had been wise enough, or frightened enough, to count the cost and turn away. Years later, Thesic was no longer a warlord. The council had not executed him, which surprised many. They had not honored him either. They had simply, quietly, taken his fleet and given him a posting at the edge of Vaskari space, a quiet station watching the dark, the kind of posting given to those the council did not know what to do with. It suited him. He had grown tired of the great stone chamber and the old ones who could not count. He spent his time studying humans. He read everything the Vaskari had on them, which was little, and then he found ways to learn more, trading quietly with the species that had begun to trade with Earth. He learned their history. He learned about a planet that had spent its whole existence at war with itself, 1,000 small bloody wars, none of which any side had ever truly won, until the humans had grown so used to enemies who would not break that they had stopped expecting anyone to break at all. He learned that the humans had never fought a war to grow stronger. They had only ever fought wars to survive, and a people who fights only to survive learns very different lessons than a people who fights only to win. He learned, eventually, the name of the captain of the Indomitable Asterisk, Eshmaro. He learned that she had survived, that her ship had been towed home and rebuilt, scar by scar, and that the humans had not scrapped it but kept it and built more like it, exactly like it, just as she had promised. And once, near the end of his long life, Thesic sent a message. It was not an official message. The Vaskari and the humans had no formal contact, no treaty, no ambassadors. It was simply a transmission, sent quietly from a forgotten station at the edge of Vaskari space, aimed at a human relay in the human tongue from one old soldier to another. It said, "This is Thesic, who commanded the Eternal Spear at Earth. I do not know if you still live, Captain. I hope you do. I have spent the years since that day learning your people, and I have come to understand that you did not beat us in battle. You beat us in something older and deeper than battle. You made us count, and we had never learned how, and the lesson cost us 9,000 years of certainty. I do not write to threaten you. I am old, and I command nothing now but a quiet station and my own thoughts. I write only to say this. In all my 81 wars, I broke 100 peoples who believed they could not be broken. You are the only enemy I ever met who simply refused to agree that breaking was possible. I have thought often about why that was. I believe it is because your people learned long ago a thing my people forgot. You learned that the point of war is not to win. The point of war is to still be standing when it ends. We forgot that because we always won. You never forgot it because you so rarely did. Tell your people, Captain, that an old Vascari warlord salutes the ugliest ship he ever saw and the bravest, and that he is glad, though it shamed 9,000 years of his kind, that he turned away. I do not think the galaxy would have been better for our winning. I think it is better for your standing. Live well. Build more ships. There will always be someone who decides you look easy. There always is. He did not expect a reply. It was the kind of message one sent into the dark not to be answered, but simply to be true. But a reply came. It came many days later, from the human relay, in the human tongue, short and rough and unmistakably the voice of a soldier who had grown old herself. It said, "Warlord, I still live, so does the indomitable asterisk. We rebuilt her, we always do. I've thought about that day too more than I should. You're right that we never expected to win, we expected to die. We built that whole fleet expecting to die, and we were ready to, and the only thing we asked of the universe was that dying would cost you too much to be worth it. That's the whole of what we are. We're not strong. We're not clever. We just decided, a long time ago and at terrible cost, that we would never agree to lose, and we have made the entire galaxy do the math you did. You were the first to do it right. You were the first to count and walk away while you still could. Most don't. Most have to be taught the hard way with their own wreckage. So I'll tell you what I tell my own people, old man, and I mean it as the highest thing I know how to say. You weren't beaten. You were wise asterisk. And in 9,000 years of your kind, you may be the only warlord who will ever earn that word. Live well yourself, and thank you, truly, for turning around. There were a lot of us behind that line who got to grow old because you did." Thesic read it many times. Then he sat at the edge of Vascari space, an old soldier at a forgotten station, watching the dark in the direction of a small blue world he had once nearly destroyed. And he thought about the ugliest, bravest ship he had ever seen, the thing that could not be put down, and about the strange, soft-shelled children who had built it expecting to die and had instead, by refusing to stop, changed the shape of the whole galaxy. The Vascari had believed they had mastered war. They had only ever mastered winning. It had taken a single human battleship, floating broken above its homeworld and refusing to fall, to teach them the difference, and to teach them, far too late, that the two had never been the same thing at all.